Aloha. Chapter 10. That had been Tom's great secret, the scheme to returning home with his brother pirates and attend their own funerals. They had paddled over the Missouri shore on a log at dusk on Saturday, landed 5 or 6 miles below the village. They had slept in the woods at the edge of the town till nearly daylight, and had then crept through the back lanes and finished their sleep in the unused gallery of the church among the chaos of invalidated benches. At breakfast Monday, Aunt Polly and Mary were very loving and attentive to Tom. There was an unusual amount of talk. In the course of it, Aunt Polly said, "Well, I don't say it isn't a fine joke to keep everyone suffering most of the week so you boys had a good time, but it's a pity you could let me suffer too so. If you could come over on a log to go to your funeral, you could have come over and give me a hint some way that you weren't dead." "Yes, you could have done that, Tom," said Mary, "and I believe you would if you had thought of it." "Would you, Tom, if you'd thought of it?" said Aunt Polly, her face lighting wistfully. I don't know. 'Twould spoiled everything." "Tom, I hope you loved me that much," said Aunt Polly with a grieved tone. "Would have been something if you cared enough to think of it, even if you didn't do it." "I dreamed about you anyway, Auntie," said Tom, feeling repentant. "That's something, ain't it? It's better than nothing. What did you dream?" "Why, Wednesday night I dreamed that you was sitting over there by the bed, and Sid was sitting in the woodbox, and Mary next to him, and Joe Harper's mother was here." "Why, she was here. Did you dream any more?" "Oh, lots, but so dim now." "Well, try to recollect, can't you?" "Somehow it seemed to me that the wind blowed the Tom pressed his fingers to his forehead and then said, "I got it now. It blew the candle, and you said, why, I believe that door is open. As I'm sitting here, I didn't I, Mary? Go on." And then, well, I won't be certain, but it seems like as if you made Sid go on and shut it." "Well, for the land's sake, I never heard the beat of that. Don't tell me, don't tell me there ain't anything in dreams. Go on, Tom." "Oh, it's all getting bright as day now. Now you said I weren't bad, only mischievous, and not only any more responsible than I think it was a colt. And then you began to cry. So I did. Not the first time either. And then Mrs. Harper, she began to cry, and said Joe was just the same, and she wished she hadn't whipped him for taking cream when she'd thrown it at herself. Tom, the spirit was upon you, land alive. Go on, Tom." "And after a while, there was a lot of talk about dragging the river for us, about having the funeral, and then you and old Miss Harper hugged and cried, and she went, 'It happened just so.' Then I thought you prayed for me, and you went to bed, and I was so sorry that I took and wrote a piece of sycamore bark. We ain't dead. We are only off being pirates, and put it on the table by the candle, and then you looked so good lying there asleep that I thought I leaned over and kissed you on the lips." "Did you, Tom? Did you, Tom? Did you? I just forgive you everything for that." And she seized the boy in a crushing embrace, and that made him feel like the guiltiest of villains. "It was very kind, even though it was only a dream," said soliloquized just audibly. "Shut up, Sid. A body does just the same in a dream as he'd do if he was awake. Here's the big apple I've been saving for you, Tom. Now go along to school. I'm thankful to the good God and Father of us all I've got you back." "Go along," said Mary Tom. You've hindered me long enough. The school children left for school. What a hero Tom was become now. He did not go skipping and prancing, but moved with a dignified swagger, as become a pirate who felt that the public eye was on him. As indeed it was. He tried not to seem to see the looks or hear the remarks as he passed along, but they were food and drink to him. Small boys than himself flocked at his heels, and at school the children made so much of him and Joe Harper that the two heroes were not long in becoming insufferably stuck up. The very summit of glory was reached when they began to tell their adventures to hungry listeners. But they only began. It was not a thing likely to have an end, with imaginations like theirs to furnish material. Tom decided now that he could be independent of Becky Thatcher. Now that he was distinguished, maybe she would be wanting to make up. Well, let her. She should see that he could be as indifferent as some other people. Presently she arrived. Tom pretended not to see her. He moved away and joined a group of boys and girls and began to talk. Soon he observed that she was tripping gaily back and forth with a flushed face and dancing eyes, pretending to be busy chasing schoolmates, and screaming with laughter when she made a capture. But he noticed that made she always made her captures in his vicinity, and that she cast a conscious eye in his direction at such times too. It gratified all the vicious vanity that was in him, and so instead of winning him, it only set him up more. The more it only set him up the more, and made him the more diligent to avoid betraying that he knew she was about. Presently she gave over skylarking and moved irresolutely about, sighing once or twice and glancing furtively and wistfully towards Tom. Then she observed that now Tom was talking more particularly to Amy Lawrence than to anyone else. She felt a sharp pang and tried to go away, but her feet were treacherous and carried her to the group instead. She said to a girl almost at Tom's elbow with sham vivacity, "Why, Mary Austin, you bad girl, why didn't you come to Sunday school?" "I did come. Didn't you see me?" "I saw you." "Did you? Well, I wanted to tell you about the picnic. My ma's going to let me have one." "Oh, goody. I hope she'll let me come." "She will. The picnic's for me. She'll let anybody come that I want, and I want you. That's ever so nice. When is it gonna be?" "By and by. Maybe about vacation." "You're going to have all the girls and boys?" "Yes, everyone that's friends with me, or wants to be." And she glanced at Tom. But he talked right along to Amy Lawrence about the terrible storm on the island, and how lightning tore the great sycamore tree all to flinders, while he was standing within 3 feet of it. "Oh my, may I come?" said Gracie Miller. "Yes." "And me too?" said Susie Harper. "And Joe?" "Yes." And so on till all the group had begged for invitations, but Tom and Amy. Then Tom turned coolly away, still talking, and took Amy with him. Becky's lips trembled, and tears came to her eyes. She hid these signs and went on chattering, but the life had gone out of the picnic now. She got away as soon as she could, and hid away, and had what her sex called a good cry. Then she sat moody, with wounded pride, till the bell rang. She roused up now, and gave her plaited tails a shake, and said she knew what she'd do. At recess, Tom continued his flirtation with Amy with jubilant self-satisfaction. He kept drifting about to find Becky and lacerate her with the performance. At last he spied her, but there was a sudden failing of his mercury. She was sitting cozily on the little bench behind the schoolhouse, looking at a picture book with Alfred Temple. And so absurd were they, with their heads so close together over the book, that they did not seem to be conscious of anything else in the world besides. Jealousy ran red hot through Tom's veins. He began to hate himself for throwing away the chance Becky had offered for reconciliation. Amy chatted happily along as they walked, but Tom's tongue had lost its function. Soon her happy prattle became intolerable. Tom hinted at things that he had to attend to, and leaving her, he hasted away. Any other boys? Tom thought, grated his teeth. Any boy but that St. Louis smarty. Oh, all right, I licked you the first day you ever saw this town, mister, and I'll lick you again. You just wait till I catch you out. At noon, Tom fled home. His jealousy could bear no more. Becky resumed her picture inspections with Alfred, but as the minutes dragged along and no Tom came to suffer, her triumph began to cloud, and she lost interest. And poor Alfred, seeing that he was losing her, he did not know how, kept exclaiming, "Oh, here's a jolly one! Look at this!" She lost patience at last, and said, "Oh, don't bother me! I don't care for them," and burst into tears and got up and walked away. Alfred went musing into the deserted schoolhouse. He was humiliated and angry. He easily guessed his way to the truth. The girl had simply made a convenience of him, and to vent her spite upon Tom Sawyer. He was far from hating Tom the less when this thought occurred to him. He wished there was some way to get that boy into trouble without much risk to himself. Tom's spelling book fell under his eye. Here was the opportunity. He gratefully opened the lesson for the afternoon and poured ink upon the page. Becky, glancing in at the window behind him at the moment, saw the act and moved on. He started homeward now, intending to find Tom and tell him. Tom would be thankful, and the troubles would be healed. But before she was halfway home, however, she had changed her mind. The thought of Tom's treatment of her when she was talking about the picnic came scorching back and filled her with shame. She resolved to let him get whipped on the damaged spelling book's account, and to hate him forever into the bargain. Poor girl, she did not know how far she was nearing trouble herself. The master, Mr. Dobbins, had reached middle age with unsatisfied ambition. Darling of his desires was to be a doctor, but poverty had decreed that he should be nothing higher than a village schoolmaster. Every day he took a mysterious book out of his desk and absorbed himself in it when no classes were reciting. He kept that book under lock and key. Every boy and girl in the school had a theory about the nature of that book, but no two theories were alike, and there was no way of getting at the facts in that case. Now, as Becky returned to school and was passing by Mr. Dobbins' desk, which stood near the door, she noted that the key was in the lock. It was a precious moment. She glanced around, found herself alone, and the next instant she had the book in her hands. The title page, Professor Somebody's Anatomy, carried no information to her mind. So she began to turn the leaves. She came at once upon a handsomely engraved and colored frontispiece. A human figure, stark naked. It was at that moment Tom Sawyer stepped in at the door and caught a glimpse of the picture. Becky snatched at the book to close it, and it had the hard luck to tear the picture plate half down the middle. She thrust the volume into the desk, turned the key, and burst out crying with vexation. Tom Sawyer, you are just as mean as you can be, to sneak up on a person and look at what they're looking at. How could I know you were looking at anything? You ought to be ashamed, Tom Sawyer. You know you're going to tell on me, and oh, what shall I do? I'll be whipped, and I never was whipped in school. And then she stamped her little foot and said, "Be so mean if you want. Hateful, hateful, hateful." She flung out of the house with a new explosion of crying. Tom stood still, rather flustered by this onslaught. Presently he said to himself, "What a curious kind of fool a girl is. Never been licked in school. Shucks, what's a licking? Well, of course I ain't gonna tell old Dobbins on this little fool, because there are other ways of getting even on her that ain't so mean. But what of it? Old Dobbins will ask who it was tore his book. Nobody will answer. Then he'll ask first one and then to others. And when he comes, and when he comes to the right girl, and when he comes to the right girl, he'll know it. Girls' faces always tell. She'll get licked. Well, there ain't any way out of it for Becky Thatcher. Tom conned the thing a moment longer and then added, "All right, though. She'd like to see me in just a fix. Let her sweat it out." In a few moments, the master arrived and school took in. Tom did not feel a strong instinct in his studies. Every time he stole a glance at the girl's side of the room, Becky's face troubled him. Presently, the spelling book discovery was made, and Tom's mind was entirely full of his own matters for a while after that. Becky roused up from her lethargy of distress and showed good interest in the proceedings. She did not expect that Tom could get out of his trouble by just denying that he spilled the ink himself. And she was right. Denial only seemed to make the thing worse for Tom. Becky tried to believe that she was glad of it, but she found that she was not certain. When the worst came to worst, she had an impulse to get up and tell Alfred Temple, but she forced herself to keep still, because, she said to herself, he'll tell about me tearing the picture, sure. I wouldn't say a word, not to save his life. Tom took his whipping and went back to his seat, not at all broken-hearted, for he thought it was possible that he had unknowingly upset the ink himself, in some skylarking bout. He had denied it for form's sake, and because it was custom, and had stuck to the denial from principle. A whole hour drifted by. The master sat noddingly in his throne. The air was drowsy with the hum of study. By and by, Mr. Dobson straightened himself up, yawned, and then unlocked his desk and reached for his book, but seemed undecided whether to take it out or leave it. Most of the pupils glanced up languidly, but there were two among them that watched his movements with intent eyes. Mr. Dobbins fingered his book absently for a while, and then took it out and settled himself into his chair to read. Tom shot a glance at Becky. He had seen a hunted and helpless rabbit look as she did, with a gun leveled at its head. Instantly, he forgot his quarrel with her. Quick, something must be done. He would run and snatch the book, spring through the door and fly. His resolution shook only for one little instant, and the chance was lost. The master opened the volume. The next moment, the master faced the school. Every eye sank under his gaze. There was that in it which smote. There's that in it which smote even the innocent with fear. There was silence while one might count to 10. The master was gathering his wrath. Then he spoke. Who tore this book? There's not a sound. One could have heard a pin drop. The master searched face after face for signs of guilt. Benjamin Robbers, did you tear this book? A denial. A pause. Joseph Harper, did you? Another denial. Tom's uneasiness grew more and more intense. The master scanned the rank of boys, considering a while, then turned to the girls. Amy Lawrence? A shake of the head. Tracy Miller? Another negative. Rebecca Thatcher? Tom glanced at her face. It was white with terror. Did you tear? No, look me in the face. Did you tear this book? A thought shot like lightning through Tom's brain. He sprang up to his feet and shouted, "I done it!" The school stared in perplexity at this incredible folly. But as Tom stepped forward to go to his punishment for the surprise, the surprise, the gratitude, the adoration that shone upon him out of poor Becky's eyes seemed to pay enough for 100 floggings. Inspired by the splendor of his own act, he took, without an outcry, the most merciless flaying that even Mr. Dobbins had ever administered, and also received, with indifference, the added cruelty of a command to remain 2 hours after school, for he knew who would wait for him outside till his captivity was done. Tom went to bed that night, planning vengeance against Alfred Temple, for with shame and repentance, Becky had told him all. But even the longing for vengeance had to give way soon to pleasant musings, and he fell asleep at last, with Becky's last words lingering dreamily in his ear. "Tom, how could you be so noble?" Vacation was approaching. The schoolmaster, always severe, grew more severe than ever, for he wanted the school to make a good show on examination day. He rode, and his ferule were seldom idle now. Mr. Dobbins' lashings were very vigorous ones, too, and although he had carried under his wig a perfectly bald and shiny head, there were no sign of feebleness in his muscle. As the great day approached, he seemed to take a vindictive pleasure in punishing the least shortcomings. The consequence was that the boys spent their nights in plotting revenge. At last, they hit upon a plan that promised victory. They swore in the sign painter's boy, told him the scheme, and asked for his help. He had reasons for being delighted, for the master boarded in his father's family and had given the boy ample cause to hate him. The master always prepared himself for the great occasions by getting pretty well fuddled, and when the dominie reached the proper condition on examination evening, the sign painter's boy said that he would manage the thing while the master napped in his chair. Then he would be awaked at the right time and hurry to school. In the fullness of time, the interesting occasion arrived. At 8 in the evening, the schoolhouse was brilliantly lighted and adorned with festoons of flowers. The master sat throned in his chair upon the raised platform, with his blackboard behind him. He looked intolerably mellow. Rows of benches in front of him were occupied by the dignitaries of the town and by the parents of the pupils. To his left were seated the scholars who were to take part. The rest of the house was filled with non-participating scholars. The exercises began. A very little boy stood up and sheepishly recited, "You'd scarce expect one my age to speak in public on the stage," etc., accompanying himself with the painfully exact and spasmodic gestures which a machine might have used, supposing the machine to be a trifle out of order. But he got through safely, though cruelly scarred, and got a round of applause. A little shamefaced girl lisped, "Mary had a little etc." Performed. Sorry, 2 seconds. What? A little shamefaced girl lisped, "Mary had a little lamb," etc. Performed a compassion-inspiring curtsy, got her meed of applause, and sat down flushed and happy. Tom Sawyer stepped forward with conceited confidence and soared into the indestructible "Give me liberty or give me death" speech, with fine fury and frantic gesticulation, and broke down in the middle of it. A ghastly stage fright seized him, and his legs quaked. True, he had the manifest sympathy of the house, but he had the house's silence too, which was even worse than its sympathy. Tom struggled a while, and then retired, utterly defeated. There was a weak attempt at applause, but it died early. The boys stood on the burning deck, followed. Also, the Assyrian came down, and other declamatory gems. Then there were reading exercises and a spelling fight. The Latin class recited with honor. The feature of the evening was in order now. Original compositions by the young ladies. Each in her turn stepped forward, cleared the throat, held up their manuscripts tied with dainty ribbon, and proceeded to read, with labored attention to expression. The themes were the same that had been illuminated by their mothers and grandmothers before them: friendship, memories of other days, forms of political government compared and contrasted, melancholy, filial love, etc. It may also be remarked that the number of compositions in which the word beauteous was overfondled and human experience was referred to as life's page was up to the usual average. When the last composition had been read, the master, mellow almost to the verge of geniality, put his chair aside, turned his back to the audience, and began to draw a map of America on the blackboard to exercise the geography class once more. But he had made a sad business of it with his unsteady hand, and a smothered titter rippled over the house. He knew that the matter was, and he knew what the matter was, and set himself to write it. He sponged outlines and remade them, but the tittering was only more pronounced. He threw his entire attention upon his work now, as if determined not to be put down by the mirth. Yet the tittering continued. It even manifestly increased. And well it might. There was a garret above, pierced with a scuttle over his head, and down through the scuttle came a cat, suspended around the haunches by a string. She had a rag tied about her head, and jaws to keep her from mewing. As she slowly descended, she curved upwards and clawed at the string. She swung downwards and clawed at the intangible air. The tittering rose higher and higher. The cat was within 6 inches of the absorbed teacher's head. Down, a little lower. She grabbed his wig and with her desperate claws, clung to it, and was snatched up to the garret in an instant, with the trophy still in her possession. And how the light did blaze abroad from the master's bald pate, for the sign painter's boy had gilded it. That broke up the meeting. The boys were avenged. Vacation had come. Thanks for coming by again, kind stranger. I don't know who you are. Hope you enjoyed. Catch you next time.